Have you ever wondered why so many of Europe's oldest castles are remembered not only for kings and queens, but also for whispers in empty halls, footsteps that no one can explain, and stories that refuse to disappear? Tonight, we are not searching for proof of ghosts. Instead, we are following the long shadows that history has left behind, because every legend, no matter how mysterious, begins with real people, real places, and real events. Over the centuries, wars, betrayals, executions, plagues, and forgotten tragedies became woven together with folklore until the line between history and myth slowly faded. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy relaxing history journeys like this one. It helps the channel continue bringing these stories to life. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the distant echoes of Europe's ancient castles carry you gently into tonight's story. For hundreds of years, castles stood as symbols of power. Their thick stone walls protected kingdoms, guarded treasures, and sheltered noble families through wars that reshaped the continent. Yet those same walls also witnessed moments of unimaginable sorrow. Soldiers spent their final nights inside cold towers before marching into battles they would never survive. Prisoners waited in damp cells for judgments that often ended in execution. Noble families celebrated lavish feasts in great halls where only a generation later, enemies would spill blood across the very same floors. Stone has an unusual way of preserving memory. Unlike wood, it does not burn easily. Unlike paper, it does not simply fade away. Generation after generation repaired these castles, rebuilt damaged towers, and added new wings while leaving much of the original structure standing. As centuries passed, countless lives unfolded beneath the same roofs. Some were joyful, many were tragic. Together, they created the atmosphere that inspired legends which still attract visitors from around the world today.
Travelers during the Middle Ages rarely described castles as haunted. They feared something far more immediate: war, disease, famine, and political violence. The supernatural stories often grew much later, passed from grandparents to grandchildren around fireplaces during long winter evenings. Every generation added another small detail. A mysterious figure became a grieving queen. An unexplained sound became the footsteps of a forgotten prisoner. Before long, history and imagination had become impossible to separate. Across Europe, nearly every region has at least one fortress surrounded by tales of restless spirits. Scotland speaks of phantom pipers wandering ancient battlements. England remembers royal prisoners whose names still echo through its towers. Ireland tells stories of violent feuds leaving behind uneasy souls. Romania connects medieval rulers with creatures of the night. France preserves legends of sorrowful ladies in green gowns, while the Czech Republic guards one castle said to have been built over something far more mysterious than ordinary ground. Whether these stories are true has never been the most important question.
Perhaps a better question is this: why have generations of people continued telling the same legends for hundreds of years? The answer lies not in ghosts alone, but in memory. Human beings rarely forget places where extraordinary events happened. A battlefield becomes sacred, a palace becomes legendary, and a lonely castle, standing against wind and rain for nearly 1,000 years, naturally gathers stories as easily as its old stones gather moss. Many of these castles survived invasions, religious conflicts, civil wars, revolutions, and even world wars. Entire kingdoms disappeared while the castles remained. Dynasties rose and fell, borders shifted across maps, languages evolved, yet the ancient walls continued overlooking valleys, rivers, forests, and villages exactly as they had centuries before. They became silent witnesses to history itself. Modern visitors often arrive carrying cameras, smartphones, and curiosity instead of swords and shields. Some hope to experience something supernatural. Others simply admire medieval architecture. Tour guides carefully balance documented history with local folklore, allowing guests to decide for themselves what they believe. Scientists may explain strange sounds through old stone corridors and changing air pressure. Historians search through forgotten records. Local storytellers smile quietly, convinced that not every mystery needs solving.
As we traveled together tonight,
we will treat every castle the same way, with respect for both history and tradition. When historical evidence exists, we will follow it. When legends appear, we will explore them as the people of each region have passed them down through generations, without claiming they are proven facts. Sometimes the truth will be fascinating enough on its own. Sometimes the legend will reveal just as much about the people who created it as about the castle itself. Our journey begins in the rugged landscape of Scotland, where volcanic rock rises above one of Europe's most beautiful historic cities. There, towering over narrow medieval streets, stands a fortress whose walls have watched nearly 1,000 years of battles, royal ceremonies, sieges, celebrations, and whispered ghost stories. Long before visitors lined up at its gates each morning, the great fortress was already earning a reputation that would endure for centuries. And so, as dawn slowly touches the ancient stones above Edinburgh, our story quietly follows the winding road leading towards the castle that many believe never truly falls silent.
The first rays of morning often reach the highest point of Edinburgh before they touch the streets below. Perched upon an ancient volcanic rock that has dominated the surrounding landscape for millions of years, Edinburgh Castle has long appeared less like a building and more like a natural extension of the mountain itself. From a distance, its thick stone walls seem almost inseparable from the dark cliffs beneath them, giving the impression that the fortress has always belonged there. Yet, like every great castle in Europe, its story did not begin with ghosts. Long before Scotland became a united kingdom, this rocky summit was recognized as a place of extraordinary importance. Archaeological discoveries suggest that people lived here as early as the Iron Age. The commanding view stretched across hills, rivers, and distant coastlines, allowing anyone standing on the summit to see approaching visitors or invading armies long before they arrived. For ancient communities, there could hardly have been a more valuable location. As centuries passed, the settlement gradually transformed into a royal stronghold. By the Middle Ages, the fortress had become one of Scotland's most important centres of power. Kings held court within its walls, queens sought safety during dangerous times, royal ceremonies echoed through its great halls, while soldiers guarded every entrance. But power rarely exists without conflict. Scotland's history is filled with struggles for independence, rival noble families, and repeated invasions from neighbouring England. Again and again, Edinburgh Castle found itself at the centre of these struggles. Massive siege engines pounded its defences, archers filled the sky with arrows, supplies dwindled as defenders waited behind stone walls, hoping relief would arrive before hunger became their greatest enemy. Every siege left scars upon both the castle and the people inside it. Imagine standing atop these walls during one of those medieval attacks. Below, thousands of soldiers surround the fortress. Smoke rises from burning camps. The distant sound of horns signals another assault. Families shelter together in cramped chambers, while knights prepare for battle, knowing that by sunset many of them may never see another dawn. For generations, scenes like these unfolded repeatedly. Some historians estimate that Edinburgh Castle has endured more military sieges than almost any other fortress in Britain. Each victory brought celebration, each defeat brought mourning. Every stone absorbed another chapter of Scotland's turbulent past. Among the castle's oldest surviving structures stands St Margaret's Chapel, a remarkably small building dating back to the early 12th century. Dedicated to Queen Margaret, later honoured as a saint, the chapel survived conflicts that destroyed many larger sections of the fortress. While armies fought outside, quiet prayers continued inside these modest walls.
Even today, visitors often remark upon the unusual stillness that fills the chapel. After walking through crowded courtyards filled with tourists, stepping inside feels almost like entering another century altogether. The noise fades. The thick stone walls soften the sounds of the outside world. Sunlight filters gently through narrow windows, illuminating ancient stone that has witnessed nearly 900 years of human history. Perhaps it is this contrast between violence and peace that gives the castle much of its emotional power. Yet not every part of Edinburgh Castle carries such tranquility. As evening settles over the fortress, guides sometimes lead visitors through darker passageways beneath the main buildings. Hidden vaults, military prisons, and underground chambers remind everyone that castles were never simply royal homes, they were also prisons.
Captured soldiers from France, Spain, America, and other nations spent months or even years confined within these walls during various wars. Far from home, uncertain whether they would ever see their families again, many carved names, drawings, and symbols into wooden doors and stone surfaces. Some of those markings remain visible today, preserved almost by accident across the centuries. For many prisoners, time itself became another form of punishment. Days blended into weeks, weeks into years. Outside, kingdoms changed. Inside, life rarely changed at all. It is hardly surprising that later generations imagined restless spirits lingering in these forgotten rooms. One of the castle's oldest legends tells of a lone piper. According to Scottish folklore, centuries ago a young bagpiper was sent beneath the castle into a mysterious network of underground tunnels. His task seemed simple enough. As he walked deeper into the darkness, he would continue playing his pipes so that people above ground could follow his location by listening to the music echoing beneath the streets. At first, the melody floated clearly through the stone. Then it grew fainter. Then, without warning, it stopped altogether. Search parties entered the tunnels, but never found either the piper or his instrument. No one could explain his disappearance. Since then, some believe faint strains of distant bagpipe music can occasionally be heard beneath the castle, especially when the weather is calm and the city grows quiet. No historical document confirms this tale, but its survival across generations reveals something equally fascinating. Medieval underground passages were confusing, dangerous, and largely unexplored. Stories like these helped transform ordinary fear into unforgettable legend. Another famous tradition speaks of a ghostly drummer.
According to local belief, whenever Scotland faced great danger, a phantom drummer would appear upon the castle walls, beating an invisible warning before disaster struck. Some claimed the mysterious figure appeared before invasions or political upheavals, only to vanish without leaving footprints behind. Again, historians have found no reliable evidence that such sightings truly occurred. Yet the legend reflects an older truth. For centuries, drums announced approaching armies, royal ceremonies, and military alarms. People naturally associated the familiar sound of drums with moments of national importance. Over time, memory and folklore intertwined, until an ordinary military signal became a supernatural omen. Whether these figures ever existed matters less than what they represent. Every castle develops stories that mirror its history. A fortress shaped by endless wars remembers ghostly soldiers. A prison recalls unseen prisoners. A royal palace imagines wandering monarchs. The legends become emotional echoes of the lives once lived within those walls. As darkness settles across Edinburgh, the city's lights begin sparkling below the volcanic hill like countless tiny stars. Visitors slowly leave through the great gates. Heavy wooden doors close once again. The wind moves quietly across ancient battlements that have stood through nearly 1,000 years of triumph and tragedy. And while Scotland's greatest fortress gradually disappears into the evening mist, another castle far to the south waits beside the River Thames, one whose history contains even more documented executions, imprisoned queens, vanished princes, and legends that continue to fascinate the world today.
The journey from Scotland to southern England follows rivers, rolling hills, and centuries of shared history. As the road winds towards London, the landscape gradually changes. Quiet highlands give way to crowded towns, ancient forests become open countryside, and eventually the broad River Thames comes into view, flowing steadily through the heart of a city that has shaped European history for nearly 2,000 years. Rising beside its northern bank stands a fortress unlike any other. At first glance, the Tower of London appears almost modest compared with some of Europe's enormous hilltop castles. It does not dominate a mountain, nor does it overlook endless valleys. Instead, it stands within one of the world's busiest capitals, surrounded by modern buildings, bridges, and constant movement. Yet few places in Europe have witnessed so many dramatic moments of history. Unlike many ghost stories that rely almost entirely upon legend, the tower's reputation begins with events that historians can firmly document. Kings truly imprisoned their rivals here. Queens truly walked through its gates knowing they would never leave alive.
Political prisoners spent years staring through narrow windows, uncertain whether tomorrow would bring freedom or execution. Its walls have absorbed centuries of fear. The story begins shortly after the Norman conquest of England in 1066. William the Conqueror understood that controlling London meant controlling the kingdom itself. To secure his authority, he ordered the construction of a massive stone fortress overlooking the Thames. At its heart stood the White Tower, an enormous keep whose thick walls announced Norman power more clearly than any royal proclamation ever could. Construction demanded extraordinary effort. Thousands of labourers hauled stone, timber and supplies from distant regions. Skilled masons shaped enormous blocks by hand. Every wall was designed not only for defence, but also as a permanent symbol of royal authority. Anyone approaching London by river would immediately understand who ruled England. Over the following centuries, successive monarchs expanded the fortress. New towers appeared, defensive walls grew stronger, deep moats surrounded the complex. Royal residences, armories, workshops, chapels and prisons gradually transformed the tower into a self-contained world behind stone walls. Life inside varied dramatically depending upon one's status. A king might host lavish banquets beneath richly decorated ceilings, while only a few hundred feet away, prisoners shivered inside cold, dimly lit cells. Noble families attended ceremonies, wearing velvet and silk, as condemned captives quietly awaited their final dawn.
Few buildings illustrate the extremes of medieval life so clearly. Among the tower's most famous residents was Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII. Once crowned Queen of England with magnificent celebrations, she later returned through these same gates under arrest, accused of crimes that historians still debate today. For days she remained imprisoned within the tower. Then, on a spring morning in 1536, she walked calmly toward the specially prepared scaffold inside the fortress grounds. Contemporary witnesses described remarkable composure during her final moments. With a single stroke, her life ended, and another chapter of English history began. It did not take long for stories to emerge. Some visitors later claimed to see a woman dressed in pale clothing wandering near the Chapel Royal where Anne was buried. Others described a silent figure moving across the Tower Green before disappearing into the darkness. No reliable historical evidence supports these sightings, yet the emotional weight of Anne's story made such legends almost inevitable. A queen who experienced extraordinary triumph followed by extraordinary tragedy naturally remained unforgettable in the public imagination. Another mystery surrounding the tower has fascinated historians for more than 5 centuries. In 1483, 2 young boys, Edward V and his younger brother Richard, were brought into the tower after the death of their father, King Edward IV. Officially, they were awaiting Edward's coronation. Instead, they vanished. The boys were never seen in public again. Rumors spread rapidly across England. Some believed they had been murdered. Others hoped they had escaped. Political accusations followed almost immediately, with suspicion falling upon Richard III, although historians continue debating responsibility even today. Centuries later, workers renovating parts of the tower discovered the skeletons of 2 children beneath a staircase. Many believe they belonged to the missing princes, though absolute certainty has never been achieved. Perhaps because the mystery remains unsolved, stories soon developed claiming that the young princes still wandered silently through the ancient corridors. Unlike many ghost legends, this one reflects an enduring historical question rather than a completed story. Sometimes uncertainty proves even more powerful than certainty. Not every prisoner held within the tower was a monarch or noble.
Religious reformers, political rebels, foreign spies, scholars and military commanders all passed through its gates. Some eventually gained freedom, others disappeared into history after their executions. Graffiti carved into prison walls still survives today, created by men who had little else to leave behind except their names, prayers, and symbols of hope. Standing before those carvings today creates an unusual feeling. The letters remain sharp despite hundreds of years passing since they were cut into stone. They remind visitors that history is not merely a collection of dates, it is the record of individual lives, each filled with fears, ambitions, disappointments, and dreams. Then there are the ravens. According to one of the tower's most famous traditions, if the ravens ever leave the fortress, both the tower and the kingdom itself will fall. Whether this belief originated in medieval folklore or developed later remains uncertain. What is certain is that ravens have become an inseparable part of the tower's identity. Today, specially appointed raven masters care for the birds, ensuring that several always remain within the grounds. Visitors often smile at the story, yet beneath the legend lies an important truth. Throughout history, people have searched for symbols that represented stability during uncertain times. The ravens became exactly that, a living reminder that some traditions can outlast kings, governments, and even empires.
As evening shadows stretch across the White Tower, the crowds gradually disappear once again. The ravens settle into silence. The ancient stones, which have witnessed nearly 1,000 years of triumph, betrayal, imprisonment, and loss, remain exactly where they have always stood. The stories linger because the history is unforgettable. And although London's fortress holds some of Europe's most famous legends, across the Irish Sea stands another castle with a far darker reputation, a place where generations have whispered not only of restless spirits, but of violence so brutal that even local families hesitated to speak of it after sunset.
Crossing the Irish Sea, the landscape begins to change once again. England's crowded cities slowly give way to rolling green hills, quiet villages, and narrow country roads bordered by ancient stone walls. Here, the pace of life feels gentler, but the history is no less dramatic. Deep within the countryside of County Offaly stands a fortress that many people describe as the most haunted castle in Ireland. Unlike Edinburgh Castle or the Tower of London, whose stories are closely tied to kings and national politics, this castle tells a far more personal story. Its legends were shaped not by empires, but by powerful local families whose rivalries lasted for generations. The castle is known as Leap Castle. At first glance, it appears almost peaceful. Its weathered stone walls rise above green fields where sheep quietly graze. Ivy climbs across ancient towers. Birds circle overhead, and on sunny afternoons, it is difficult to imagine that this tranquil place has become famous for some of Europe's darkest ghost stories. Yet, appearances can be wonderfully deceptive. Historians believe that a fortified structure stood on this site as early as the 13th century, though the present castle was largely built by the powerful O'Bannon clan before later passing into the hands of the O'Carroll family. The O'Carrolls were respected warriors. Like many noble families of medieval Ireland, they ruled their territory through loyalty, alliances, and military strength. Protecting land often required difficult decisions, and disputes between neighbouring clans could last for decades. Life in medieval Ireland was rarely peaceful. Honour mattered deeply. Family loyalty was expected without question. Unfortunately, those same values sometimes led to tragedies within the family itself. Perhaps the most famous story connected to Leap Castle begins not with invading armies, but with two brothers. According to long-standing tradition, both belonged to the ruling O'Carroll family. One had devoted his life to the church and served as a priest. The other desired complete control over the family's lands and leadership. As the story has been passed down through generations, the priest was celebrating Mass inside the castle's small chapel when his brother entered carrying a sword. Without warning, violence shattered the silence. The priest was struck down before the altar itself. Whether every detail happened exactly as the legend describes remains uncertain. Medieval records from Ireland are often incomplete, and stories changed as they were repeated through the centuries. However, historians agree that violent struggles over succession were tragically common during this period. Brothers did sometimes become rivals. Families did turn against one another.
The legend endured because it reflected a reality people understood all too well. Even today, the chapel where this event is believed to have taken place is often called the Bloody Chapel. Visitors frequently pause there longer than in other parts of the castle, not because they expect to see anything supernatural, but because the room itself feels heavy with history. The narrow windows admit only thin streams of light. Ancient stone walls surround the small chamber. Every sound seems softer, almost as though the building encourages silence out of respect for events long past. It is easy to understand how legends found a home in such a place. As generations passed, stories spread that the murdered priest never truly left the chapel. Some visitors claimed to glimpse a figure dressed in old religious robes. Others described a feeling of sudden sadness or unexplained stillness while standing near the altar. There is, of course, no historical evidence proving these experiences, yet they reveal something fascinating about human memory. Places connected with great sorrow often inspire powerful emotions, even centuries later. Sometimes those emotions become stories, sometimes those stories become traditions, and eventually traditions become part of the identity of the place itself. But the Bloody Chapel is only one chapter in Leap Castle's reputation. During renovations in the early 20th century,
workers made an astonishing discovery hidden within the walls. Behind a concealed opening lay a deep shaft known today as the oubliette. The word comes from the French verb oublier, to forget. Unlike ordinary prison cells, an oubliette was designed with only a small opening at the top. Prisoners could be lowered inside. Escaping was nearly impossible. The chamber remained hidden from view, allowing those confined there to disappear almost completely from the outside world. When the shaft was explored, workers reportedly uncovered a large collection of human bones. Accounts differ regarding the exact number. Some later stories claimed that several cartloads of remains were removed. Others believe those figures became exaggerated over time. Even so, historians generally agree that human remains were indeed discovered, confirming that the oubliette had once served a grim purpose. That discovery transformed local folklore.
People who had once dismissed old ghost stories suddenly looked at the castle differently. If so many lives had truly ended within its walls, perhaps it was no surprise that unsettling legends had survived for centuries. Among the castle's most mysterious tales is one unlike almost any other in Europe. Rather than describing the ghost of a specific historical person, local tradition speaks of an unsettling creature, often called the elemental. Witnesses who claimed to have encountered it gave remarkably varied descriptions. Some spoke of a shadow-like figure, others described glowing eyes emerging from darkness. A few even compared its smell to decaying vegetation mixed with sulfur. Unlike elegant ghostly ladies or wandering medieval knights, this mysterious being belonged more to Irish folklore than recorded history. No historian can identify when the story first appeared. Perhaps it grew from ancient Celtic beliefs. Perhaps it evolved from generations of whispered tales shared around winter fires. Or perhaps it simply reflects humanity's timeless tendency to give unknown fears a recognizable shape. Whatever its origin, the elemental remains one of the most unusual legends associated with any European castle. Yet despite all these stories, Leap Castle is not remembered only for darkness. Over the centuries, it has also been repaired, restored, and cared for by people who appreciate its remarkable history. Today, musicians occasionally perform within its ancient rooms. Visitors arrive from around the world, drawn not merely by ghost stories, but by the opportunity to stand inside a genuine medieval fortress that has survived hundreds of years of conflict, change, and renewal. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these castles quietly offer. Even places marked by tragedy can endure. Stone outlasts fear, history outlasts rumour, and every generation leaves behind another layer of memory for the next to discover. As twilight settles gently across the green Irish countryside, the silhouette of Leap Castle slowly fades into the evening mist. Far to the east, beyond forests, mountains, and the winding valleys of Transylvania, another fortress rises dramatically above the landscape, a castle forever linked with one of history's most misunderstood rulers and a legend that has blurred the boundary between fact and fiction for more than a century. That ancient road now leads us towards Romania, where perhaps no castle in Europe has inspired more myths than the one waiting beyond the Carpathian Mountains. The journey eastward carries us across the heart of Europe, where broad rivers carve through fertile plains before giving way to the towering peaks of the Carpathian Mountains. Dense forests blanket the hillsides, their dark silhouettes stretching across the horizon as morning mist clings to the valleys below. It is a landscape that seems almost designed for legends. Here, in the historic region of Transylvania, stands one of the world's most recognizable castles. Its towers rise dramatically above a rocky cliff, their red-tiled roofs visible long before travelers reach the narrow road leading to its gates. Surrounded by forests and mountain passes, Bran Castle has become almost inseparable from stories of vampires, haunted knights, and supernatural creatures. Yet the truth behind the castle is far more fascinating than the myth. Unlike many people imagine, Bran Castle was never the permanent home of Count Dracula. In fact, the famous vampire himself never truly existed. He was created in 1897 by Irish novelist Bram Stoker, whose novel Dracula became one of the most influential works of Gothic fiction ever written. Curiously, there is no evidence that Stoker even visited Bran Castle while writing his novel. So how did this beautiful medieval fortress become forever linked with Dracula? The answer lies in the remarkable way history and fiction sometimes become impossible to separate.
Bran Castle was constructed in the late 14th century, around 1377, after the citizens of Brasov received permission from the Hungarian king to build a powerful stone fortress, protecting one of the most important mountain passes in the region. This route connected Transylvania with Wallachia. Merchants carrying cloth, spices, salt, and precious metals passed beneath its walls every day. Soldiers guarded the road, collecting customs duties and watching for enemy movements through the surrounding mountains. For centuries, Bran Castle served primarily as a military fortress and customs station. Its purpose was practical rather than mysterious. Its thick walls resisted attacks, its towers offered excellent views across the valleys, its narrow staircases forced invading soldiers to move slowly, giving defenders every possible advantage. Like many castles, it occasionally changed hands as political alliances shifted across Eastern Europe. Kings strengthened its defences, military commanders repaired damaged walls.
Later, during the 20th century, Queen Marie of Romania transformed much of the fortress into an elegant royal residence, filling its rooms with light, artwork, and carefully chosen furnishings. Walking through the castle today reveals surprisingly warm interiors. Wooden staircases wind upward through narrow passageways, small windows frame breathtaking mountain scenery. Cozy chambers replace the cold, gloomy halls that popular films often encourage us to imagine. It feels far more like a lived-in home than a place of horror. So where did Dracula enter the story? To answer that question, we must briefly leave Bran Castle and meet a real historical ruler whose reputation inspired countless later legends. His name was Vlad III. History remembers him by several names, including Vlad the Impaler. He ruled Wallachia during the 15th century, a time when Eastern Europe stood under constant threat from the expanding Ottoman Empire. His reign was marked by relentless warfare. Vlad believed fear could protect his kingdom. He punished enemies with extraordinary cruelty, most famously through impalement, a method of execution so brutal that it shocked even many of his contemporaries. Historical records written by both friends and enemies describe landscapes filled with impaled prisoners, meant to discourage future invasions. Modern historians continue debating how much of these accounts were accurate and how much resulted from political propaganda designed to blacken his reputation. What remains beyond dispute is that Vlad ruled during an exceptionally violent age. Mercy was often considered weakness, survival demanded ruthless decisions. Centuries later, Bram Stoker encountered the name Dracula, derived from Vlad's family title connected to the Order of the Dragon. The mysterious name captured his imagination. He borrowed little of Vlad's actual biography, instead creating an entirely fictional vampire nobleman who fed upon human blood and possessed supernatural powers. After the novel became internationally famous, readers naturally searched for a real castle worthy of such a legendary figure. Bran Castle, with its dramatic towers and isolated mountain setting, seemed almost perfect.
Gradually, tourism, popular culture, films and photographs strengthened the connection until millions of people came to believe it had always been Dracula's home. This transformation offers one of history's most remarkable examples of fiction reshaping reality. A castle built for military defense became famous for a character who never lived there. Visitors arriving today often expect darkness, hidden coffins, and supernatural mysteries. Instead, they discover authentic medieval history. Still, legends have a remarkable ability to create their own atmosphere. As evening approaches, fog occasionally drifts through the surrounding forests. The wind whistles between stone towers, owls call from distant trees while moonlight reflects softly upon ancient walls. In such surroundings, it becomes easy to understand why imagination flourishes. Local folklore has long spoken of strange lights seen among nearby forests. Travelers once avoided certain mountain paths after sunset, fearing wolves, bandits, or something they could not easily explain. Before electricity illuminated villages, darkness itself inspired countless stories. Not every mysterious sound required a supernatural cause, yet not every unexplained event found an ordinary explanation either. That uncertainty became fertile ground for legends. Unlike some castles where ghost stories center upon a single tragic individual, Bran Castle's mystery comes largely from atmosphere. The landscape becomes part of the legend. The forests, the mountains, the heavy mist, the silence, together they create an emotional experience that visitors remember long after returning home. Perhaps this is why Bran Castle continues attracting millions of people every year. Some come searching for Dracula, others arrive fascinated by medieval architecture. Many simply wish to experience one of Europe's most beautiful historic fortresses. Most leave discovering that the real history is every bit as compelling as the fictional one. History reminds us that reality often inspires the greatest stories. Legends remind us that imagination keeps those stories alive. Together, they ensure that places like Bran Castle never fade from memory. As the moon rises above the Carpathian Mountains and the castle's towers disappear into silver mist, our journey quietly turns west once more.
Beyond the forests of Romania and across the heart of France stands another remarkable chateau, one less famous than Bran, yet home to one of Europe's oldest tales of a sorrowful woman in green, whose quiet footsteps are said to echo through magnificent halls, where history, heartbreak, and legend became forever entwined.
Leaving behind the mist-covered mountains of Transylvania, our path turns gently towards Western Europe. The rugged peaks gradually soften into rolling vineyards, quiet rivers, and broad fields where generations have cultivated the land beneath changing skies. By the time we reach the Loire Valley in western France, the atmosphere feels entirely different. This is a land celebrated for elegance rather than warfare. Magnificent chateaux rise among forests and gardens, their graceful towers reflected in calm rivers instead of standing defiantly upon rocky cliffs. Kings once escaped here from the pressures of court life. Noble families competed to build homes that displayed wealth, refinement, and artistic beauty. Yet even among such peaceful surroundings, tragedy found its place. Our destination is the Château de Brissac, often called the tallest castle in France. With its 7 impressive stories, grand facades, and beautifully decorated interiors, it appears almost too magnificent to be associated with ghost stories. By daylight, visitors wander through elegant reception rooms adorned with paintings, crystal chandeliers, and carved wooden ceilings. Sunlight pours through tall windows, illuminating polished floors that seem to belong more to a royal palace than a haunted castle. But history has a way of revealing different faces after sunset. The origins of Brissac stretch back to the 11th century, when a fortress first guarded this strategic region. Like many medieval strongholds, it endured wars, sieges, destruction, and rebuilding over the centuries. Eventually, the powerful Brissac family transformed it into the magnificent residence admired today. Its walls witnessed weddings, celebrations, diplomatic meetings, and generations of aristocratic life. Yet behind the elegance lay the same human emotions found in every age: love, jealousy, ambition, and betrayal. Among all the stories connected with the chateau, none has endured more strongly than the legend of Charlotte de Brissac. Charlotte was a noblewoman of the 15th century. She married Jacques de Brissac, a respected nobleman and royal official. By all appearances, theirs was a marriage that strengthened political alliances and secured family influence, as many aristocratic marriages did during the period. But appearances can be misleading. According to long-standing tradition, Charlotte fell deeply in love with another man. Accounts differ regarding exactly how their secret relationship began, and historians continue debating which details belong to documented history and which emerged through later storytelling. What most versions agree upon is that Jacques eventually discovered the affair. One winter night, alerted by a servant, or perhaps by his own suspicions, he quietly entered the chateau carrying a sword. He climbed the staircase towards the private chambers. There, according to the legend, he found the lovers together. What followed became one of France's most enduring castle stories. Consumed by rage, Jacques killed both Charlotte and her companion within the castle itself.
Whether every detail unfolded exactly this way remains impossible to verify after so many centuries. However, contemporary records do confirm that Charlotte died violently in 1477, giving the legend a foundation in genuine historical tragedy. From that moment onward, the chateau acquired a new reputation. Generations of servants claimed that Charlotte never truly departed. Instead, they spoke of a mysterious figure wandering the corridors late at night. She became known simply as the Green Lady. Descriptions remained surprisingly consistent despite being separated by hundreds of years. Witnesses often describe a woman wearing a green gown. Her face appears pale. Some accounts claim dark, hollow spaces replace her eyes and nose, creating an unsettling appearance unlike that of an ordinary human figure. Others mention hearing soft footsteps echoing through empty hallways shortly before dawn. Of course, no scientific investigation has ever confirmed these stories, yet they continue to survive because they are tied to real human emotion. Unlike monsters or mythical creatures, the Green Lady represents grief. She symbolizes a life interrupted by jealousy and violence. Whether visitors believe in ghosts or not, many find themselves imagining the events of that winter night while walking through the chateau's elegant rooms. History encourages reflection. Legends encourage imagination. Together, they shape the experience of every visitor. Interestingly, the current owners of Château de Brissac have never hidden these stories.
Instead, they have embraced them as part of the castle's remarkable heritage. Guests are welcome to explore both its documented history and its famous folklore, understanding that one has helped preserve interest in the other. This relationship between history and legend appears again and again throughout Europe. Without historical events, many ghost stories would never have existed. Without legends, some castles might have faded quietly into obscurity. Each gives new life to the other.
As evening settles over the French countryside, the chateau grows remarkably quiet. The final visitors leave through its great entrance. The distant sounds of birds fade into silence. Only the gentle creaking of ancient wooden floors remains, reminding us that buildings, like people, change with age. Old timber expands and contracts. Stone cools beneath the night air. Wind slips softly around towers built hundreds of years ago. Simple natural sounds often become the seeds from which extraordinary stories grow. Perhaps that is one reason ghost legends endure so easily. Our minds naturally search for meaning whenever something cannot be immediately explained. A shadow becomes a figure, a distant echo becomes footsteps, an old memory becomes a story told from one generation to the next. And nowhere in Europe does that combination of mystery and imagination become more intriguing than at the next fortress awaiting us. Far to the east, hidden among the forests of the Czech countryside, stands a castle unlike any we have visited so far. It was not built to overlook a river. It was not designed to defend an important trade route. According to one of Europe's oldest and strangest traditions, it was constructed for an entirely different purpose: to guard something beneath the earth that people feared should never be opened. Whether that story contains any truth is another question altogether. The road from France into the Czech countryside grows quieter with every passing mile. Busy cities slowly disappear behind us, replaced by forests where tall pines sway gently in the wind, and narrow country roads weave between peaceful hills. Small villages appear only occasionally, their church towers rising above red rooftops before fading once more into the landscape. It feels like a place where history has been allowed to rest. Yet hidden among these woods stands one of Europe's most unusual castle. Unlike every fortress we have visited so far, Houska Castle was never built beside an important river. It guarded no prosperous city, it overlooked no major trade route. No large army ever needed to capture it in order to control the surrounding region. For historians, this raises an interesting question. Why build such an impressive castle in a location that offered so little military or economic advantage? For centuries, that mystery has inspired one extraordinary legend after another. Construction of Houska Castle began during the reign of King Ottokar II of Bohemia in the second half of the 13th century. Like many medieval rulers, the king ordered numerous castles to strengthen his kingdom, but Houska has always seemed different. Its design puzzles even modern researchers. Some of its defensive features appear to face inward rather than outward. Several windows seem decorative, opening towards solid walls instead of providing clear views of the countryside. Its location appears isolated from the usual medieval transportation routes. While historians offer practical explanations for many of these features, local folklore developed a far more mysterious answer. According to one of the oldest traditions in the region, the castle was not built to keep enemies out, it was built to keep something in. Beneath the castle, people believed, lay a deep opening in the earth. Some called it an endless pit, others described it as a gateway leading directly into hell. According to medieval villagers, strange winged creatures occasionally emerged from the darkness, terrifying anyone who ventured too close. Animals reportedly refused to approach the opening, birds avoided flying above it. Even experienced hunters preferred taking longer routes through the surrounding forests rather than passing nearby. Whether anyone truly believed every detail is impossible to know.
Medieval Europe was a world deeply shaped by religion. People naturally interpreted unfamiliar places through spiritual beliefs. A cave emitting unusual sounds or cold air could easily become associated with supernatural forces. An unexplored shaft descending into darkness invited imagination to complete what the eye could not see. One famous version of the legend tells of a condemned prisoner offered an unusual bargain. If he agreed to be lowered into the mysterious pit and reported what he saw below, his sentence would be forgiven. Desperate for freedom, the prisoner accepted. Villagers tied strong ropes around his waist and slowly lowered him into the darkness. At first, everything remained quiet. Then, only moments later, terrified screams echoed from below. The men above immediately began pulling him back as quickly as they could. When the prisoner finally reached the surface, those watching reportedly recoiled in shock. His hair had turned completely white. His face appeared aged far beyond his years. Shaking uncontrollably, he refused to describe exactly what he had witnessed beneath the earth. According to the story, he spent the remainder of his life avoiding any conversation about the pit. There is, of course, no historical evidence that this dramatic event ever occurred. Yet the tale survived because it captured one of humanity's oldest fears. Not fear of monsters, but fear of the unknown. Dark places have always inspired stories. Before electric lights illuminated caves and underground chambers, descending into complete darkness meant surrendering every familiar sense. Sounds echoed strangely, air currents shifted unexpectedly.
Shadows moved when no sunlight existed. It required very little imagination for ordinary natural phenomena to become extraordinary mysteries. The chapel built inside Houska Castle adds another intriguing layer to the legend. Rather than standing beside the supposed pit, local tradition claims it was constructed directly above it. Its purpose, according to folklore, was to seal whatever lay beneath with sacred protection. Visitors today often notice medieval frescoes decorating the chapel walls. Among them are unusual paintings unlike those found in many European churches. Some depict armed figures battling strange creatures. Others show symbolic scenes whose meanings historians continue to debate. These remarkable artworks have only strengthened the castle's mysterious reputation. Interestingly, no reliable medieval document describes Houska Castle as a gateway to hell. Most written references to that legend appeared much later. This reminds us that folklore often grows gradually. A single local story becomes several become tradition. Eventually, tradition becomes inseparable from the place itself. Despite its frightening reputation, Houska Castle experienced a history much like many other noble residences. Different families owned it across the centuries. Wars passed nearby. Political changes reshaped the Kingdom of Bohemia. Repairs were made, rooms were renovated, new generations adapted the ancient building to changing times. Life continued. Even during the 20th century, the castle witnessed another chapter of history. During the Second World War, German forces occupied many historic buildings throughout Central Europe, and Houska Castle was no exception. This period later inspired additional rumors, including claims that secret experiments or mysterious research had taken place inside the fortress. However, historians have found little reliable evidence supporting many of these sensational stories. As often happens, genuine history became intertwined with modern imagination. The result was yet another layer of myth added to an already mysterious place. Today, visitors arriving at Houska Castle often expect overwhelming fear. Instead, many describe something quite different. Silence. The surrounding forests absorb distant sounds. Birdsong replaces dramatic music. Sunlight filters gently through ancient trees before touching weathered stone walls that have stood for more than 700 years. The atmosphere feels peaceful, perhaps even contemplative. It is an interesting reminder that places rarely feel exactly as legends describe them. Sometimes the greatest mystery is not hidden beneath the earth at all. Sometimes it exists within the human imagination itself. Stories have an extraordinary ability to transform ordinary landscapes into unforgettable destinations. And Houska Castle has become one of Europe's finest examples of that transformation. As evening slowly settles across the Bohemian forests, mist begins gathering between the trees. The castle's towers fade quietly into the growing darkness, standing watch over secrets that history cannot fully explain and folklore has no desire to solve. Our journey, however, is nearing its final destination. Northward, beyond these quiet forests and across the English borderlands, another ancient fortress waits beneath the winds of Northumberland. Unlike Houska, its reputation was born not from a mysterious pit beneath the earth, but from centuries of brutal warfare, family feuds, and countless eyewitness accounts that have earned it the title many still give it today, the most haunted castle in England.
As dawn slowly returns to the skies above Central Europe, our final journey begins. The forests of Bohemia gradually disappear behind us as the road stretches northwest across fields, rivers, and quiet villages. Before long, the landscape changes once again. Rolling farmland gives way to the rugged border country between England and Scotland, a region where centuries of conflict shaped everyday life. For generations, this frontier was never truly peaceful.
Raiding parties crossed the border without warning. Villages were burned, livestock was stolen, families lived with the constant possibility that tomorrow might bring another attack. In such a world, castles were not simply symbols of wealth, they were places of survival. Standing among these wind-swept fields is Chillingham Castle, a fortress whose history reaches back to the late 12th century. At first glance, it possesses everything one might expect from a medieval stronghold. Thick stone walls, towering battlements, heavy wooden gates reinforced with iron, narrow windows designed more for defense than comfort. Yet, unlike many castles that gradually became elegant residences, Chillingham never completely escaped its military past. Its position near the Anglo-Scottish border meant that war remained a familiar visitor. English and Scottish armies marched through these lands countless times. Kings passed through its halls, soldiers rested within its walls before continuing towards battle. The castle became both a fortress and a temporary home for those living through one of Britain's most turbulent regions. History alone would have made Chillingham remarkable, but over the centuries another reputation slowly emerged. Many people began calling it the most haunted castle in England. Unlike some legends that revolve around a single ghost, Chillingham is said to host an entire collection of mysterious figures. Whether these stories are true remains a matter of personal belief. What cannot be denied is that they have become an inseparable part of the castle's identity. Perhaps its most famous legend concerns a young boy. Visitors and staff have long spoken of hearing the quiet cries of a child during the night. According to local tradition, strange sounds were reported for generations, although no one could identify their source. Then, during restoration work in the 20th century, builders reportedly discovered the remains of a young boy hidden within part of the castle walls. The discovery naturally attracted enormous attention. Some believed it explained the old stories. Others argued that the connection resulted from coincidence rather than evidence. Historians caution that many details surrounding this account remain difficult to verify completely.
Even so, the legend continues because it touches upon something deeply human, the desire to give forgotten individuals a voice once more. Another well-known figure associated with the castle is the Lady Mary Berkeley. Unlike many ghost stories rooted primarily in folklore, Lady Mary's life is firmly documented. She married Lord Grey of Wark during the 17th century. For a time, she likely imagined a comfortable future within the world of the English nobility. Instead, her marriage ended in heartbreak. Her husband abandoned her for another woman, leaving Lady Mary to spend much of her later life separated from the happiness she had once expected. According to castle tradition, her quiet figure is still occasionally seen walking the long gallery. Witnesses describe a graceful woman dressed in grey, moving slowly through the corridor before fading into the shadows. Whether these accounts represent supernatural experiences or the power of suggestion cannot be determined. Yet the story survives because it reflects a genuine life marked by disappointment and resilience. Another legend tells of the so-called Blue Boy. Visitors once claimed to see flashes of blue light within one particular bedroom shortly before hearing a child cry. The tale became one of Chillingham's most famous mysteries. Interestingly, after renovations altered parts of the room, reports of the phenomenon reportedly became far less common. Some interpreted this as evidence that the spirit had finally found peace. Others suggested a far simpler explanation involving changes to the building itself. Both possibilities remind us how difficult it can be to separate experience from interpretation. Perhaps the darkest stories concern a chamber popularly known as the torture room. For many years, dramatic accounts claimed that countless prisoners had suffered there under a cruel executioner. Modern historians urge caution. Although medieval punishment was undeniably severe by modern standards, many sensational stories told to visitors appear to have grown larger with repeated retelling. Some devices displayed within historic castles across Britain were added centuries later to satisfy public curiosity rather than to document everyday medieval justice. This distinction matters. History is already dramatic enough without exaggeration. Understanding what can be documented allows us to appreciate the real suffering experienced during those difficult centuries while avoiding myths presented as unquestionable fact. As evening settles over Chillingham, something remarkable happens. The crowds disappear. Only the wind continues moving across the ancient battlements. Old wooden beams respond softly as temperatures change. Owls begin calling from nearby trees.
Somewhere in the distance, sheep graze peacefully beneath the fading light. The castle feels less frightening than thoughtful. Its silence encourages reflection more than fear. By now, perhaps a pattern has become clear. Every castle we have visited carries two histories,
One belongs to documented events preserved in letters, official records, and archaeological discoveries. The other belongs to memory, stories repeated around fireplaces, shared by families and passed from one generation to another. Neither exists entirely without the other. History provides the foundation. Legend gives it lasting life. Over the course of our journey, we have crossed Scotland's volcanic cliffs, England's royal fortress, Ireland's troubled stronghold, Romania's mist-covered mountains, France's elegant chateau, the mysterious forests of the Czech Republic, and finally these quiet borderlands where centuries of conflict left lasting echoes. Each castle told a different story. Some reminded us of courage, others revealed betrayal. Some preserved genuine mysteries that historians continue exploring. Others demonstrated how imagination can transform ordinary events into unforgettable folklore. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. Why do these stories endure? Maybe because castles themselves seem almost timeless. They survive long after the people who built them are gone. Stone remembers what human memory forgets. A weathered staircase still bears the footsteps of countless generations. An old doorway continues opening exactly as it did centuries ago. The wind still passes through towers that once overlooked kingdoms now vanished from the map. Whether ghosts truly walk these halls is a question each visitor must answer for themselves. History cannot prove every legend. Neither can it erase them. Instead, both continue existing side by side, inviting us to wonder rather than insisting upon certainty. So tonight, as Europe's ancient castles slowly disappear into the quiet darkness, perhaps the greatest treasure they preserve is not the possibility of ghosts, but the countless human lives whose hopes, fears, triumphs, and tragedies became woven into the stones themselves. And with that final thought, our journey through the haunted castles of Europe gently comes to an end. Thank you for traveling through history with me tonight. May your evening be peaceful, your dreams be gentle, and may the echoes of these ancient walls fade softly into the silence of the night.